Well, for more on this, I'm joined on set now by our international affairs editor, Philip Turl. Philip, was there any way that this deal could have been saved, do you think?
Well, it could have been saved if both parties had been willing to play the game. But over the last few years, the United States has pointed out that Moscow has been developing weapons behind the scenes. First of all, Moscow denied this. Then they said, yes, we are doing it, but these weapons are eligible under this deal. Then NATO joined in and said, well, look, this is not true. And NATO has taken the defense of the United States. So earlier this year, President Trump put a 6-month limit on Russia conforming with the treaty. Russia has not done that, and it announced back in July that it was withdrawing from the treaty as well. So that 6-month period is due to end today on August the 2nd. Now, of course, going back to 1987, this treaty, as you said, was signed then by the former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev and the US president at the time, who was Ronald Reagan. It concerned ballistic and cruise missile ranges of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. And over the first 3 or 4 years, nearly 2,700 short, medium, and intermediate range missiles were destroyed. That was up until the end of the Soviet Union in 1991. So at the time, it was a treaty which definitely prevented the arms race, and many people are saying avoided the possibility of a nuclear war. Now, where do we go from here? That's the problem. The problem is that this is freeing up, in the US's eyes, its ability to compete with China, because China was not any part of this agreement, so it can develop the missiles it wants. So now the US, in a way, is quite happy this agreement is coming to an end, because that means it can now develop its own missiles opposite China, which is wanting to become a military power in Asia. The United States now able to develop its own military strength opposite China, and that frees up also Russia. But the bottom line is that this also opens the doors to a new arms race between those three countries.
And is that a very real fear, that this will be the start of a new arms race between the world's most powerful countries?
Well, one thing is for sure, this is the collapse of another treaty which is governing world order, and there are worrying noises coming out of, first of all, the United Nations. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said it's an invaluable break on nuclear war which is being lost, and the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has also issued a communique saying that Russian missiles in violation of the treaty. You have to remember that under the 1987 treaty, that prevented Russian missiles from in any way being able to hit Europe. But with that 5,500 kilometer limit now being removed by the end of this treaty, that means that Russian missiles can hit Europe within minutes. They are quite often undetectable, and the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has been warning that that is something which is now a very real threat. As for President Trump, well, he's been saying during that news briefing that we just saw when he was talking about China, he was asked about what he saw as a new deal. He was very vague about it, saying that he'd been talking to President Putin yesterday, but they just discussed forest fires in Russia, didn't even talk about the IMF treaty, but he said that there was grounds to believe that President Putin would like a new treaty of some sort concerning nuclear weapons, and that the United States also was keen to strike up a new treaty if Russia wanted to. But that seems very vague, and that is the only positive kind of noise coming out of either Washington or Russia at the moment.
Okay.